Hey, everybody, Gail Craft here, and I have a conversation for you. Listen to Nathan Segal. He is going to talk about dissociative fugue, dissociative amnesia, and self-sabotage. He's a very soft-spoken and very gentle man who has a story of abuse that was so horrific that he forgot everything. And he has been on the journey of finding the truth and putting the puzzles of his life back together. Join me now as Nathan and I get into a discussion about child disassociating and how that affected his life. Thank you. Bye.
Hello, everybody. Gail Craft here from the Empowering Process podcast. And I have with me Nathan Segal. Hi, Nathan. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. I don't know what we're going to talk about. We're going to start with something and see where it goes. What's interesting about Nathan is he has quite a complex career background, as do anyone who's over 25, by the way. So he's worked in the high-tech industry, high-tech space industry for many, many years. He's written mostly computer graphics and photography. Lately, he has done this thing called photo what is it called? Photorealistic illustration.
Yep.
Absolutely breathtaking work that he's done. And this year he came out with a series that is themed on child abuse, which is really fascinating. But today we're going to talk about, we've got those wounds. I've talked a lot about what happens with us as children and how it impacts our life. But we're going to talk today a little bit about one of the things that happens is that we self-sabotage. We take those stories with us, and as a result, what we think we want to do, actually, we unravel it. So Nathan's going to share a little bit about that because that's been coming up for him lately. What do you think, Nathan?
Okay.
Where do we want to begin?
We should begin when it started, like at least 17 years ago. I had done a deal with a software company, but unfortunately, I got cheated on the deal by the company and my lawyer, and I lost $1.5 million on the deal. I couldn't afford to sue them, so I had to move on, but it kind of messed me up mentally, and that was the beginning of the problems. Then a few years later, Revenue Canada, well, the official name is Canada Revenue Agency. The equivalent of the IRS in Canada came after me for a large amount of tax dollars, which I didn't have, and they threatened me with complete financial ruin if I didn't pay out. Now, I managed to stop the action, but it triggered 2 episodes of dissociative amnesia, and one of them I recovered from 2 years later, but the other one I didn't recover from until 8 months ago. It also triggered things to do with self-sabotage. And one of the things that I remember thinking at the time was, well, if you're going to take away everything I care about the most, I'm going to make damn sure you can't take any more away. And I created these unconscious self-sabotage episodes that I did not remember. And actually, I wasn't even aware that I'd done some of this.
So talk a little bit about the dissociative amnesia. I think that's very important for us to just spend a few moments on what that was all about.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is a problem that started when I was 10 years old. And after the last time when I came out of it, like 8 months ago, I started doing some research because I wanted to find out what the hell happened to me and how do I stop it from happening again? And I discovered a couple of things. It's triggered by trauma, various forms of trauma. And in my case, a tremendous amount of abuse from both of my parents. And so that was the root cause as far as I could tell. And my first episode happened when I was 10. And at the time, it created a limiting belief, which was I'm stupid. And I failed my way through school for 13 years after that. And I only came out of it when I was in a tech school. And I was doing reasonably well with some of my courses. And I was standing in the locker room one day, and I remember thinking, where did I ever get the idea that I was stupid? And then all the humiliation of what happened to me in grade 5 just played in my mind for a few seconds. It went away, and then my marks took off. And after that, no more problems with it. But it happened repeatedly throughout my life in terms of different situations. The worst one was when I was 29, and I was in counseling, and I revealed some of the abuse between me and my mother for the first time. And I left his office, I walked down the stairs, opened the door to the street, stepped out onto the sidewalk, and I suddenly realized that I didn't know who I was anymore. I couldn't remember my name. I didn't know what city I was in. Nothing. It was all gone. It scared the crap out of me, as you can imagine.
So let's
And
stop a little bit there.
yeah, sure.
I had a very dear friend who was a multiple personality, and disassociation was the key. And there were
Yeah,
many blanks in her life that I would fill in. She would say, "Tell me about the story about when that was what was going on," right? Because
yeah,
you disassociate because part of you cannot deal or handle or fathom what's going on anymore, and another
that's right.
part of you takes over and says, "I got you."
Yeah, it is like that in a way.
Yeah.
There, like even this last episode, I mean, when I recovered 8 months ago, it was the same thing. But just to finish the story,
Mm-hmm.
what happened to me was the worst form of dissociative amnesia you can get, and it's called dissociative fugue, where you lose everything. And in my case, I was very lucky; it only lasted 24 hours. But I had read recently, when I was looking at it, I read stories of people who would lose everything for years, even up to a decade, and they would change their name, move away to another place hundreds of miles away, start over, and they would have no memory of where they came from, and they would be found, but still have no memory of who the people were, anything, and it would be a long process for them to recover if they did. I've heard of some cases where they vanished and they were never found again.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very lucky. So I got my memories back, but the last time it happened, I remember when I got my memories back, I was working with a coach on mindset issues, and I was studying the Silva mind control technique. I was just sitting in front of my computer after a session, and then I could feel these memories come back, and I remember thinking, "Oh God, no, not again." And that's when I remembered. But it really scrambled me for quite a while, and then just last night, because a friend of mine was after me, who's noticing self-sabotage things to do with money, and he gave me, a metaphorical swift kick, and all of a sudden I remembered what I did. But some of what I did, I didn't have any memory whatsoever of doing it, so it was a part of the amnesia in a way. And there were all these things that I did to sabotage myself and prevent myself from succeeding financially, because I remember being furious with Revenue Canada and the
Right.
software company and the lawyer and all these people, and my family too. My brother had threatened me endlessly with lawsuits. He threatened my life at one point. And the self-sabotage was to make damn sure that you guys don't get anything. But what I did is I drove myself into poverty and destroyed everything I had to keep myself safe from these people, including Revenue Canada as well. It was I don't know, it was so twisted and bizarre, but that's what happened. And I just came out of it yesterday. So I have this awareness of all this self-sabotage. The only question I've got, which I don't know the answer to, is, okay, great, I've got this awareness. Is this enough to make damn sure it doesn't happen anymore? That's the part I don't know.
Yeah. So it really does take some deep work on
You betcha.
right on I hesitate to use the word healing because that indicates that we're broken, and I don't believe any of us are broken. We're on a particular journey, right? But in
Yeah.
order for you to straighten your path out, shall we say, um,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of courage because it requires you to sit with the truth of what's gone on in your life and sit with
Yeah.
the truth of how you feel about it, right?
Well, one of the things that I did when they started coming back is I could feel all this stuff, and I remember just sending a message to my unconscious, like, I really want to know what this is, because I could feel it, and it all came back later in the day, or most of it, as far as I know. I don't know if I got all of it, but I got the main stuff that I remember from way, way back.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that happened like years ago when I recovered from one of my episodes of amnesia, I didn't realize that when this happened to me, that it triggered two episodes, not one. That's the first time it happened. So it was the very worst of all of the things that I'd experienced. But I had encountered a guy online. His name is Robert Smith. He pioneered something called faster emotional freedom technique. And he was talking about amnesia. And he said, amnesia leaves clues in the form of feelings in the body. And if you can trace those and you do it a certain way, then you can recover your memories. So I remember that as the next day I was at a farmer's market. I was just walking around and I was really tracing these feelings in my body. And then all of a sudden a question popped into my mind. And then all of a sudden I wound up like looking around like a dark corner of my mind, and all the memories were there. I remembered everything.
Mm-hmm.
I fell away, and then I wound up placing a phone call later that day, and I wound up with $1,000 worth of work in like 5 minutes.
Right.
So it was really quite cool, but I didn't know about the second one that was operating, and I had no idea. And one of the worst parts about dissociative amnesia, I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't access it. And quite often, dissociative amnesia robs you of the tools that you need to recover.
Right. Right.
And quite often, to remember something, you get triggered by something. And I don't know what the trigger was this last time around. The self-sabotage, it was where my friend just really gave me like an etheric swift kick yesterday or the day before. And I started looking, I started paying attention, and all of a sudden all this stuff came back. So I've been looking at it, I wrote it down, I shared it with a coach that I've been working with, and so we'll see. I mean, I think it's enough right now that I have the awareness of it, and it's not hidden anymore. So that's a good first step. And beyond that, I couldn't tell you. I haven't a clue.
Well, so one of the things that you mentioned, which is so, so true, is that your body remembers.
Yep, it
So
definitely does.
the
Yeah,
map is in your body, right?
yeah,
Where energy and your body cells capture and hold on to that
yeah,
history, that energy, right? And so
yeah.
you can tap in, especially one of the things I do with clients who are say an event comes back, oh my God, I thought I got over that. Like, okay, so let's talk about where we're at right
Sure.
now. And I don't go to the story. So I'm not like a shrink. So what happened when you were 5? That was when
Oh,
you were,
no,
that's when you were 5. That's right. Your
yeah,
body right
that's,
now is triggered. So
yeah.
where is this in your body? Right. And what is your body trying to tell you? Because it's telling you something.
Well, it's been interesting because uh, I made the decision a while ago to really reprogram the way that I've been thinking and all these different issues that I had. And I discovered, well, I shouldn't say I discovered because I knew of this woman already. I actually interviewed her once when I was a member of a podcast called The Thought Hackers. The woman in question is Marissa Peer,
Mm-hmm.
top hypnotherapist, or one of them in the UK. And she had all this stuff. And I started using it to overwrite negative messages. And I think that was actually part of the reason why this came back, because I can't really say for sure, but I think it's because of, and it's also to do with this whole narcissism thing that showed up in my life. And when it did, in the way that it did, all of a sudden, all these loose ends in my life suddenly got tied together. Everything is now in like this encapsulated thing. And now I have all this understanding that I never had before. Like, I grew up with narcissistic parents and other relatives around me, and supposedly bipolar. But now that I'm looking at it, I'm going, wait a second. Because a lot of these behaviors they match narcissism. So I'm not really sure whether it was bipolar or narcissism, but a lot of things have made sense. And in terms of the narcissistic stuff in my life, it's like, oh, so that's what it was. And when I look back at the behavior of my parents, there were certain behaviors that they both had, especially my mother. Like, what happened? It was like 6 years ago, and I was working with a colleague by the name of Hamish Baston, and we had a channel, a group on Facebook about PTSD. Now, for a solid year, I was hearing from people about narcissism, and I'm going, no, I don't want to hear it. No, it's too much. And then my mother died. And then about a month later, I had a message from a guy by the name of Mark Santos, who sent me a link to a video about covert narcissism to do with a guy by the name of Ross Rosenberg. And I remember watching it and going, oh, shit, because I recognized my mother in it. And then a short time later, somebody sent me a checklist on covert narcissism, 15 items. And I got on the phone with my ex-girlfriend, who had been a part of all this. We went through the list together and discovered that my mother tallied on every single one of the 15 points, and the most extreme of all of those points. And I remember thinking, oh my God, my situation was way worse than I thought. But
because your mind protected you.
It did. And one of the things that it did, which was actually genius, was it created a form of dissociation. So even though I was surrounded by a lot of violence, it prevented the violence from hurting me too deeply. It created kind of a shield, but it also created a thing where I would be looking at the violence in the world around me and having trouble understanding, why is it like that? And then one day it hit me. I realized that this was another form of dissociation, not amnesia, not that, but it created a shield to protect me from the violence of my family, so that it couldn't penetrate past a certain depth. And so it was a huge life-saving device, and I'm very grateful to that part of my mind that did that, because it really, it saved me from an enormous amount of pain.
A shield works both ways. For me,
Yes.
I built a wall, and I would say I call it a brick wall, and it was probably 3 bricks thick.
Works by me.
Yep, as a child. And it kept me safe, but it also kept me from connection. It kept me from, right? It kept me from the world. It kept me from the world. And as I started taking the bricks down, it was the scariest thing until, you kind of get into a flow, right? And then you're not afraid anymore, because yes, I'm going to go through some pain, emotional pain. Yes, I'm going to have to face me, right? No blame on anybody, but face how I contributed to this, and how I still carry it around with me, and how do I stop, until I hit the last brick. And the last brick was my mother. And I had worked on her because she died when I was 3. So I worked on those abandonment issues. They were obvious. And so I do a process, guys. If you have a question that you don't know the answer to, your body remembers. So here's how you tap into that. Before going to sleep, conscious mind told my subconscious mind, hey guys, you're not going to dream tonight. You don't have a free ride. Tonight you're going to work. I have this one brick, and it's time for it to go, but I don't know what it is. So you're going to find the story for me. and you're going to
Yeah.
present me with what happened. And I
Yes,
woke up the
agree.
next morning and knew exactly what happened, was able to resolve it, and it's great. All the
Yeah.
answers.
It's actually, I have to say it, and I can only wonder what your listeners or our viewers might be thinking. It's sitting here talking with you. It feels rather quite nice to talk about. I'm
Thank
not
you.
joking,
Thank
actually.
you.
It's partly to do with what you're sharing, but also partly to do with what we're talking about. But when I say it's quite nice. Um, there's no trauma for me in this moment. I'm not upset. I'm not hurting. Um, the word grateful comes to mind, appreciative, um, and really, yeah, appreciating being able to spend time in this way because it's real. It's not so much fluff of what's going on in the world or other things that we might encounter. No, this is like real life, and two people having a discussion about longstanding serious problems. And I never imagined I'd still be dealing with this crap, but there's something that comes to mind. I was listening to a guy, he has since passed away. He was a motivational speaker. I believe he was either from Australia or New Zealand. His name was Stuart Wilde. And he was talking about family dynamics. And he was talking about these two people, I think it was Dorothy and Harry. And Harry was thick as two planks, and Dorothy was this. And you get these two people, and they come together, and they get married, and they have you. And he said, so it's going to take 20 years to get over his stuff, 20 years to get over her stuff, 20 years to get over their shared stuff, and then you'll have another 10 years to yourself.
If you are aware enough to know that you need to do the work.
Well, there's that. Yeah, but that's the rub, right? As they say. And of course, that I had a certain amount of awareness because, I entered into counseling when I was 19. I was in a lot of mental pain. I wanted to stop it. My mother tried to stop me from going to counseling, but I just thought, screw you. I know that the reason you want me to stop has nothing to do with me in any way. It's like you're afraid your shiny image is going to get tarnished. And I ignored her, which was absolutely awesome in retrospect. And the woman that I met, it had to do with me at the time. I'd just gotten out of a religious cult. So I was an expert in mind control by then.
Because you had been controlled.
Well, yeah. What was really interesting about that whole journey is when I came out of that, went through the deprogramming, recovery, all that, I wound up meeting a guy by the name of Mike Crockveld in Montreal. And a while ago, to do the whole COVID episode, we were talking about mind control because that's a big part of what was happening. And he said to me, I know why you wound up in a cult. And I said, why is that? And he said, because you were already in one with your parents. Your parents were cult leaders. And this is why you were so susceptible. And this is why you fell for it. And I remember when he said that to me, those things where you see like a cartoon or something and the light bulb appears over the head. That's exactly what it felt like. And I instantly knew he was right.
Right.
And it's like, wow, that's cool, man. So,
well, because all of the things from the relationship with your parents that felt safe, right? That because you don't know, you're as a child being programmed that this is what safety is. A cult has that safety. It's like you don't have to think about much of anything. Here are the rules. You follow the rules, right? Yeah. And then you're fine. You don't follow the rules, and you get the Jesus beat out of you,
well,
metaphorically or physically. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely sucked at following the rules to do with what happened when I was growing up. And now I know what it was. But back then, like my father violated my boundaries repeatedly, my mother and other people too. I didn't learn what boundaries were until about 20 years ago in relationship counseling. Didn't help my relationship, but it helped me a lot in terms of boundaries. I started setting boundaries with my family, and they got so upset when they tried to stop me, and I wouldn't let them get away with it. And eventually it led to a major showdown a dozen years ago. And that's when I said, Like at the time, I had a neurolinguistic programming coach. And one of the things she kept telling me is, your family is broken. But I didn't believe her. And I thought I could fix it. Now, this is a part of the narcissism stuff. You can't fix a narcissist, as I've discovered. And what happened is we were going along, and then I had a major fight with my mother and brother at one point. I became violently sick for a month, and I thought I was going to die. And then one day I got better. And right after that, my coach asked me to write out a timeline of the abuse. And so I sat for 4 hours. I covered 30 years. And then I read what I wrote. And the first thought that popped into my mind was, why am I still talking to these people? And the immediate answer was, because you're family. And that's when I had the insight that changed my life. I thought, but if I remove the label of family and I look at the behaviors alone, I would have ended this relationship with you decades ago. I've allowed the label of family and all that implies to blind me to the truth. And when I look at the behaviors here, I realize I'm long overdue to get out. And every time we get together, there's a threat of violence and ongoing manipulation. So at that point, I wrote to my coach and I said to her, I need your help in writing a PFO letter. And if you're wondering what PFO stands for, it stands for please fuck off. And if you're wondering, okay, well, why are you calling it that? I'm Canadian or polite.
So you say, please, eh?
Please fuck off. And yeah, exactly. It's true. And, but I wrote the letter and they said, I see what's happened. I take full responsibility for my part in this, but I also know that this abuse is not going to stop unless I stop it. So I said, effective immediately, I'm going no contact and I never want to hear from any of you again for any reason. And so that was fine. And then years later, I was writing about my experiences online, and that's when I discovered that my brother and my mother had been spying on me on the internet for 10 years. And when I wrote about some stuff on a blog, the next day I get an email from my brother with the word rebuttal, and he ripped off my domain name and then put up these sites to steal my traffic and trash me in every way under the sun. And that's when I blew. And I went after him and my mother in a social media fight for years, which didn't last until my mother died in December of 2017.
So,
and after that, I went no contact again, and it's been radio silence ever since.
Yeah. So that, getting into the argument and that just feeds the fire. It doesn't solve anything, and it just continues. That's why it went on for years.
I didn't know any better. I was just so goddamned angry and furious with them for spying on me. Even after I left, I couldn't stand it anymore, and I blew like Mount Vesuvius.
Yeah.
Buried the village
and I would
Pompeii and
highly
everybody
suggest anybody listening to this that is not the approach to take. Get in touch with a coach who can help you navigate your feelings. And, it's interesting because I wrote a post, I think it was last week, maybe the week before, I don't know. But the post was about forgiveness. A lot of people have been talking about forgiveness this month for some reason, September, the month of September. And I finally wrote this post that I can forgive you, but I still hold you accountable. I can forgive you for not being aware, for not being enlightened, for not working on yourself. I can forgive you for all of that stuff, but you still own your shit. And, I will not, I don't even hold you accountable. I just say you're accountable. It's not up to me to hold you accountable. I can only hold me accountable. And that's the key, Nathan. There's no one that you can control, manage, manipulate except you. And as soon as you really own that, you set yourself free, man. You set yourself free.
The truth is like all this stuff is like, it's almost like anecdotal in a way. Because I talk about it and there's a certain amount of emotion, but the truth is I have barely even thought anything about my family for like years.
Yeah.
Because, one of the things that's happened sometimes, and it happened one time after a relationship breakup, I went through spontaneous forgiveness without even trying to do it. And in terms of the family, I mean, I rarely think about them anymore. And with the exception of stuff like this, yeah, a little bit of drama, a little bit of anger, but it very quickly passes, and away I go. I've managed to work through a lot of it. But the interesting thing about it, like, I forget who it was who said, don't worry about forgiving anybody, just forget. I think it was the Dalai Lama who might have said that. Not sure.
Well, I
But
think
it's like,
that's what we mean when we say forgiveness. I
yeah,
really don't,
maybe.
because
Yeah, maybe.
we kind of our language is just so limiting. It really does not
It
explain.
truly is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, that's something I've been encountered many times. It's like a quick side journey as part of my spiritual path. I was a part of a group. We were studying something called Advaita, and there was a book out there called "I Am That" by oh, what was his name? Nisargadatta Maharaj. So he's very much revered by all of the people I knew. But there's one major problem. Nobody could understand the teachings, and they were all confused. And one day I had a realization why. And I spoke with my friend Claudio, who is also a spiritual teacher, and he was really excited. He wanted me to write a book with him, and I said, I don't need a book. I just need a sheet of paper. But what it was a confusion to do with the word you, because the language that this book was written in, I think, was Marathi out of India. And I realized that even though I didn't know the language, but it was very obvious to me that there were multiple versions of the word you. It's like Spanish, for example, is tu and usted.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of different versions. But in English, we only have one.
Mm-hmm.
So to give you an example of how this works, I was talking with my teacher, Stephen Bodian, at one point, and he had this teaching that he got from Jean Klein, which was, you are present when you are absent. Now, you probably hear that and go, what the bloody hell does that mean? And your eyes glaze over and you're going, what the hell did he just say? Well, that's where the you problem comes into play. So to translate it, you, ego, mind. No, hold it. You're present when you are absent. Sorry, let me get that right. You, eternal consciousness, the one, are present when you, the ego, mind, are absent. That's what it means. That's the translation. And when I realized that, I was able to go into Nisargadatta and I understood everything. And so at one point I was sitting with an ex-girlfriend. I read her a passage out of the book and I watched her eyes glaze over. And then I said, let me translate it. And I went through it and I noticed her eyes cleared and she could see clearly. And she said, so that's what it means. And I said, that's what it means.
Mm-hmm. So very, very interesting. So, any personal development journey, that is a journey, not a stop and, oh, I reached this goal, now I can forget about it, but a journey, right? Because there is no goal. There is no goal,
bang
guys.
bang goes another illusion,
Right, right. There goes another life. But anyone who goes on this journey will be faced with the surreal, will be faced with facing the unknown, will be faced with uncovering the lies that we've been raised with. And
Yeah,
it's enlightening and it's refreshing and it's, to know the truth is just miraculous. But let's wrap this up, okay, Nathan?
Sure.
So
It's been a pleasure.
it's been awesome. So you were talking about, the dissociative amnesia. You were talking about really getting some clarity because of what just happened most recently, this is not what we're planning to talk about today, which is
No,
awesome.
we were not.
No, which is what I love. So if you had one thought to leave with the listeners today, what would that be?
Well, it's one thing that comes to mind is that if you get a spiritual teacher, one of the things that you need to do is you need to develop full trust in your teacher. Now, what I did with Stephen Bodian is I tested him repeatedly to see if he would stay with me or run away. What happened is that he stayed with me always. And after a while, I developed full trust in him so that whenever he gave me a teaching, I could let it in, let it go all the way in, let it take root, let it do what it would do, and reap the rewards from it. And so if you do have a teacher, like, it's extremely important that you develop the trust by whatever means, and then to just let the teachings come in and take root and do what they're meant to do. And
There
that was a
definitely
huge
has to
thing for me.
there has to be a rapport. That's why there are so many out there,
Absolutely, yeah.
and so many, more than one road to Mecca. Find your road.
Yeah.
Find your
Well, I
road.
mean, in terms of Stephen, like, I instantly knew when I encountered his webpage that he was the right guy, but I still tested him, and I was rather shameless about it, and I never told him. But
I'm sure he knew.
He probably did,
Mhm.
but he never called me on it. But he turned out to be rock solid in every way psychologically.
Mhm.
And I got to a certain point where I realized I don't need to do this anymore. And I just let go of all of my resistance, all of my whatever I was trying to do to hold back. And so the end of the story, which I haven't mentioned, is at one point, Stephen said to me, "You're done. For you, spiritual awakening is going to happen." And I remember feeling a combination of excitement and dread. 3 months later, I walked out of my bedroom and I woke up. And it was very much like all the stories that you've heard, and maybe that's for another conversation, but I had this thing called spiritual awakening. It was definitely real. It was confirmed. Like, the thing about it, they say when you have this experience, it's self-confirming. That happened. Stephen confirmed it. A couple of other teachers confirmed it. And I know for certainty that it happened. I don't have any doubt whatsoever.
And so if
So,
someone wanted to get in touch with you and maybe find out more, how would they do that, Nathan?
well, they could write to me at my email address, which is visualartist49@gmail.com. They could find me on Facebook, Nathan Segal, or under LinkedIn, Nathan Segal. And that would do it.
Okay, fantastic. We'll put that information in the show notes. Thank you so much, Nathan. I know we could go on forever.
Yes, we
Everybody,
could.
thank you so much for bearing with us and listening to us. It's quite the story. This is Gail Craft from the Empowering Process podcast. If something came up for you, please do put it in the notes and we'll get back to you. If you love this, please give us a thumbs up. If you know someone who could actually learn something from this, share it out to them. And as always, please do subscribe so that you know when the next episode is available. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Empowering Process podcast. Be sure to visit Gail at gailcraft.com to learn more about how she serves thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and goal seekers. And remember, if you like this broadcast, be sure to share and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.